He didn't speak. He didn't need to. In a noisy cafe on the edge of Charleston, where conversations collided and phones never stopped buzzing, he simply watched. One hand wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, the other resting still. And yet, people noticed him more than the loudest voice in the room. We live at a time where silence feels dangerous, where if you're not posting, tweeting, or explaining, the world assumes you've disappeared. But maybe the ones who say the least are the ones we should be listening to. Centuries ago, Machiavelli understood something we've forgotten, that silence, when chosen with intention, isn't weakness. It's power, it's protection, it's strategy. And in a world obsessed with being seen and heard, sometimes the greatest influence belongs to the one who watches and waits. Stay. Because by the end of this story, you might never look at silence the same way again. 1. The cost of unnecessary speech. "Every word you give away is a piece of your power," she once told her son, her voice quiet but firm, like the creak of an old porch swing in a Carolina dusk. He had come home frustrated, replaying that meeting over and over, where he'd tried too hard to prove he belonged. "You don't have to fill the room to be seen," she said. "Sometimes silence draws the sharpest focus." In Washington, a young congressional staffer stepped into a high-stakes session eager to prove himself. The issue was sensitive, funding cuts, partisan lines drawn tight. Before anyone asked, he spoke, a flurry of facts, half-formed ideas, and confident assertions. Across the table, a seasoned strategist simply smiled and leaned back, saying nothing. An hour later, that same strategist had reshaped the entire agenda, using the very details the young man had carelessly laid out. What the staffer thought was confidence, the room read as insecurity. What he believed was leadership, others saw as exposure. Every word you speak creates a trail. Sometimes it leads somewhere good, but often it's a path others will use to find your weaknesses, to set their traps. A spoken intention becomes a contract in others' minds, and if you change direction later, they won't see it as growth. They'll call it inconsistency. We think speaking proves we have control, but the truth is, most people talk to avoid discomfort, not to display strength. There's a kind of intimacy in silence that few understand. It's not cold, it's careful. And it's the kind of care that protects not just your thoughts, but your dignity. Mystery isn't dishonesty. It's wisdom wrapped in restraint. Because when you explain everything, why you acted, what you feel, how you see the world, you become something others can measure. And the things that can be measured can be managed. But when you hold your truth a little closer, when you let your presence speak louder than your voice, people start to lean in. They wonder. They respect. And most importantly, they hesitate to underestimate. In a world full of noise, the one who speaks less often speaks last, and most powerfully. And sometimes that quiet person is the one who wins the war before the rest even realize there's a battle. 2. 3 types of strategic silence. Some silences are just pauses. Others are strategy, deliberate, precise, more powerful than a dozen clever words. Machiavelli knew that not all quiet is created equal. He saw silence not as emptiness, but as a weapon sharpened by patience. And in today's world, that kind of silence is rarer and more needed than ever. A. Information gathering silence. In a high-rise boardroom in Austin, 2 candidates wait for their turn. One can't stop talking, his accomplishments, his ambitions, his polished jokes. The other listens. He asks questions. Not the kind that flatter, but the kind that dig. When the room empties, it's the quiet one they call back, not because he dazzled them, but because he made them feel seen. The fool speaks first. He rushes to fill the space, to prove his value. But in doing so, he exposes his hand. The wise wait, because silence isn't a void, it's a mirror. Let others talk long enough, and they'll show you who they are, what they fear, what they want, what they'll never say outright. The one who listens more? They're not passive, they're gathering. B. Authority-building silence. Out in Montana, there's a sheriff who doesn't say much. People call him a man of few words. But that's just the surface. He listens to complaints, hears the gossip, lets the town argue itself tired. And when he finally speaks, slow, deliberate, it cuts through the noise like thunder on a still night. Words lose value when they come too easily. But silence? That builds weight. Real leaders don't defend every decision or respond to every accusation. They don't flinch when misunderstood, because they know, when you speak rarely, your voice carries further. C. Ambiguity, preserving silence. In a tense Pennsylvania town hall, tempers rise. Two sides demand answers, but the mayor doesn't choose one. Not yet. He listens. He nods. Each side thinks he's with them, and maybe, in parts, he is. But what he won't do is declare too early, because he knows once he does, options vanish. Silence isn't always about caution. Sometimes it's about freedom. When you hold back, you stay fluid. You're not pinned, not branded, not owned. It's not deceit, it's discipline. Because the moment people believe they fully understand you, they'll start building the cage to keep you in it. And silence? That's how you slip the lock. 3. The psychological power of silence. Silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's a space, ripe and echoing, with everything we think we understand but don't. And in that space, people show themselves. Projection. There was a woman in Nashville, soft-hearted, big-dreamed. She met a man who barely spoke. At dinners, on long drives, in the hush between midnight songs. But oh, the things she imagined. That his silence meant safety. That his eyes meant promise. She filled every blank with hope. And when he left without a word, she filled those same blanks with fear. But here's the truth. He never promised anything. She just revealed herself. Silence doesn't lie. It invites. And what people bring to that silence, that's their own reflection, their longing, their ghosts, their hunger to be understood. If you're quiet long enough, you don't just hear their words, you hear what they fear to say. And sometimes, that's all you need to know. Dominance. In a sleek downtown office in Chicago, a man walks into a job interview. Others before him had come in loud, quick to dazzle, eager to charm. But he doesn't rush. He pauses. He listens. He answers with precision, not performance. And slowly, the panel leans forward, not because he's proving himself, but because he's not trying to. The one who speaks first often gives away power, like a gambler playing his hand too early. But the one who holds silence, he becomes the dealer. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. A quiet confidence that says, I know what I bring. I don't need to sell it to you. In communication, the one who listens longest often holds the highest ground. Not because they speak less, but because their words arrive after they've already read the room. Mystique. There's a high school football coach in Kansas who never shouts his plays. A retired professor in New England who rarely gives advice. But when she does, students remember it for decades. These are not loud people, but their presence is louder than most. Mystery isn't manipulation, it's reverence. For yourself and for the sacredness of being unknowable. What can't be fully seen becomes powerful. What's explained too much becomes forgettable. In the end, silence doesn't just give space to others. It grants you sovereignty over your story. Because when they don't know everything, you get to write your next chapter in peace. 4. The transparency trap. Just be authentic, they say. Speak your truth. But what they don't tell you is that even truth poured out too freely becomes something hollow, something staged. In Los Angeles, a young content creator built a following by bearing it all. The heartbreaks, the family feuds, the nights she cried on the kitchen floor. Her followers called it brave, raw, real. But late at night, when the phone was off and the applause faded, she stared at the ceiling and felt strangely exposed. Not because she'd lied, but because she had handed over parts of herself to people who hadn't earned them. Not every truth is meant to be public. Transparency is a beautiful thing, when rooted in love, in trust, in safe hands. But in strategy, in leadership, negotiation, even survival, it can be suicide. Machiavelli understood what many still don't. When you speak too soon, too fully, you give the world your playbook before the game even begins. You bind yourself to words that might not serve tomorrow. You turn your evolving self into a fixed portrait, and that portrait can be used against you. There's a difference between being honest and being strategic. One says, "This is who I am when I choose to show you." The other says, "Take everything. I hope it doesn't cost me later." It's not deception to keep parts of yourself sacred. It's wisdom. Because in a world that asks for more than it gives back, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is hold your truth gently, quietly, until you know the room is ready to receive it with care. And if it never is, then at least your soul stayed yours. 5. How to use silence in modern life. Silence in the modern world feels almost like rebellion. We live in an age that rewards the loud, the fast, the immediately available. But real power, the kind that lasts, the kind that shapes moments rather than simply fills them, often belongs to those who speak less and mean more. Here's how that power unfolds in everyday life. A. Information asymmetry. Before you open your mouth, open your ears. Whether in a boardroom in Manhattan or across the kitchen table in a Dallas home, the rule holds. The one who listens more, learns more. Ask before you answer. Watch before you move. Let people speak their truth first, because in their rush to be heard, they'll often reveal far more than they intended. Their fears, their limits, their secret hopes. And once you have that map, your next step won't just be smarter, it'll be quieter, sharper, harder to predict. Silence here isn't retreat, it's reconnaissance. B. Strategic ambiguity. There's wisdom in clarity, but there's freedom in restraint. Say what you believe, but don't lay every brick of your plan on the table. Not yet. In work, this might mean outlining the destination, but not the whole route. In love, it might be sharing your values without promising a future you're still figuring out. Life changes, people shift, and the ones who panic when things get murky, they're the ones we stop trusting. True confidence doesn't flinch in the unknown. It adapts and leaves room to grow. C. Discomfort is power. There's a silence that stings when someone expects you to fill the space with apology, with panic, with proof of your worth. Don't. Let it stretch. In negotiations, Silence after an offer can rattle the other side more than words ever could. In a difficult conversation, sitting still with the discomfort instead of rushing to defend yourself is often what turns tension into transformation. Holding the pause isn't weakness, it's control. It's saying, I'm not afraid of this space. I'm strong enough to wait. Because in a world rushing to speak, the one who waits, watches, and whispers at just the right time, that's the one who wins. Conclusion: the strategic whisper. He barely said a word. They whispered after the deal closed, papers signed, glasses clinking in the quiet corners of the room. But somehow, he owned it. We live in a world that praises volume, loud opinions, louder declarations. But real influence? It often comes dressed in stillness. A man who says little but knows exactly to speak holds more sway than a dozen who never stop talking. The quiet ones aren't always shy. Sometimes they've just learned that not every thought needs an audience. That power doesn't need applause. It needs direction. Machiavelli didn't worship ruthlessness. What he truly revered was control, not of others, but of self. The ability to restrain, to wait, to move when the time is right, and remain still when the world demands a reaction. So the next time you feel the urge to over-explain, to defend, to perform your worth for a world already too full of noise, stop. Silence isn't weakness. It isn't absence. It's the deepest form of presence. Because sometimes, the strongest message, the one they remember long after the words fade, is the one you chose not to say.